the amount of data in organizations will quadruple as well. So now you have a lot more information to analyze. So what that means is where the research opportunities exist right now is in that area, the need for speed. I need to be able to look at the same amount of data in the same amount of time, larger amount of data in the same amount of time that I used to be able to do that. So right now I'm spending, say, 2 seconds for every, or 2 microseconds for every packet that goes out. In future, even though my data has quadrupled, I need to be able to meet the same standard, 2 microseconds for every package that goes out. So anything that introduces efficiency in that analysis, anything that introduces the ability to look at this voluminous amount of data at a very fast pace is going to be a very material impact for the future. The second big thing is correlate and prioritize. So now you have multiple independent pieces of information, and there are too many alerts. And I have to tell you one thing, having worked in corporate environments for a while. Too many alerts are as bad as no alerts, because I don't have people bandwidth to be able to look at all those alerts. So too many alerts are as bad as no alerts. So that's where correlation type of technologies would be really, really helpful. If I have 5 tools, intrusion detection systems, firewalls, virus protection software, things like that, something obviously becomes much more important if it has footprints in all the 3 versus something that is confined to just 1. So that ability to correlate, that ability to introduce intelligence into the voluminous amount of data that I have, and that ability to prioritize, that is going to be a lot more value to me versus looking at everything as a mass volume, but it not making any sense to me. Then finally, false positives. This is a problem that is overwhelming right now for most organizations. An intrusion detection systems on an average generates about a 1 million alert for an organization that has 50,000 people. 1 million alerts a week. You can just imagine what that means in terms of being able to analyze that data intelligently. So our ability to filter out false alerts, our ability to discard that is, and focus on just what is the relevant data, that is going to be of very increased significance in future. And if you guys do some research and figure out some good ideas about that, come and talk to me about that. I will be the first buyer of that technology. IDS and IPS. So there are 2 common approaches right now in intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems. Signature based, where you have a signature, a stamp that you can compare your threats against and verify whether that's indeed a threat or not. And learning based. So learning based systems understand how your environment normally functions, and once they determine that quote unquote normal behavior, anything that is out of bounds of that normal behavior is reported as an alert. What I see happening in future is that the 2 technologies will combine somehow to deal with the problems that I had identified in the previous slides. Voluminous amount of data and introducing some intelligence into the data that gets reported. Another type of technology that is going to be more prevalent in organizations in future is controlling dissemination of information. So we live in a world where 32 gigabytes of data can fit on something really, really small, a USB drive. And the fact is that if you look at the statistics, as I said before, 80% of an organization's assets reside in information. So someone could presumably walk away with a large portion of information within an organization on a drive that is this big. So that protection of intellectual property, that is going to be a big focus. DLP technology will become a more mature discipline. And right now, it is still somewhat immature because, again, a lot of false positives. Because, for example, if you are looking at social security numbers, it will 3 + 4 + 3 type of patterns. It will search for that and report that. But there is too many data that matches 3 + 4 + 3 type of pattern. So there is an enormous amount of false positives that get reported. So the future trend is going to be that DLP is going to become more mature, and the organizations are going to be dependent more and more on data loss prevention to control the information leaving their organizations. the predicament here really is the same as what music companies are facing right now. Anyone can, no matter what digital rights management people put on their songs, someone is going to figure out an easy algorithm to crack that, and then suddenly it will be on the web and everyone will be exploiting that. So this is a big problem that organizations will struggle against. Fortunately, it's much more controlled for us because everything is happening within organizations' environment, so you can control that to some degree. One of the biggest changes that is happening right now is the importance that web-based tools are gaining. So think of Salesforce.com. Before Salesforce.com came into existence, most organizations had custom software built in-house where they manage their Salesforce inputs and statistics. Salesforce.com changed all of that. But because now people can do their transactions on the web, and all of this is managed by a third party. But it introduces a corresponding risk. Now the data is not in my control anymore unless I introduced an appropriate agreement with the company prior to doing that. And that's a big risk. Think about it. I mean, the fact that if you control the data, you can do a lot with it, as I said in my previous point. But if you don't control it, if it is resident in some other third party's server, some other third party's locations, if you did not do good due diligence in making sure that your data will be protected, it's going to look really bad for you if a security breach were to happen. This is a pain point for almost any company that I know of, legacy technologies. What's wrong with Telnet, by the way? What's wrong with usage of Telnet in your software? Anyone? You guys are security students. It's a simple question. Yes?
Telnet is not encrypted.
Exactly.
Exactly. Telnet is unencrypted, our login is unencrypted, RSH is unencrypted, FTP is unencrypted. When you exchange data in an unencrypted format, it's going to be really easy for someone to tap into your network and be able to decipher what your passwords are. And once you have the password, you can footprint the network and introduce a security breach, and then nothing is under control after that. Legacy technologies are very prevalent in organizations. Many organizations are using programs that were written in 1980s or even 1970s. And think about whether information security was an important consideration at that point of time. It was not, right? And when people did their coding and their implementation, information security figured nowhere in their requirements. And now we have to deal with the fallout of all of that. So CSOs have to deal with that. CSOs have to put long-term strategies in place on what to do with things like that. So the answer is not always that get rid of technology, right? Because the business has become so used to using these things, using a certain tool, that getting rid of it is probably going to cause a lot of havoc. But if possible solutions reside in the fact that maybe you can introduce an IPsec tunnel to encrypt the data that flows, so that even if someone were to tap into it, either tunnel it or transport it, if someone were to tap into it, then IPsec has kind of taken care of the encryption aspect. So you can introduce some wrappers around these legacy tools to make sure that the data that gets transported is protected. Compliance. Compliance is a huge issue for most organizations. Compliance is very important because it's not optional. You have to do that. You have to take care of making sure that if you want to use, for example, Visa in your business, you have to make sure that you are complying with PCI requirements if you are a level 1 merchant. It's a part of business. You are forced to do those activities, and since you have to do it within a small amount of time or within a certain amount of time, it's a big pain point for most people. I already talked about some of these, so I wouldn't spend too much time on that, but why is it that most organizations are having a tough time complying? The reason for that, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there are a lot of risks. There's all sorts of points where it could fail. And so trying to hit all of those at once is really difficult.